This work is done with a collaboration with a bunch of authors. Asreen really should be here today presenting the paper, but unfortunately there's a bit of a backlog for getting visas right now, so she couldn't attend. So I'm afraid you've got me today presenting. So I think one of the more interesting kind of developments in SOUPS has been this kind of recent interest in not just hacking, but also trying to understand what it is to be a victim of hacking. And this is, of course, particularly urgent in cases of stalking and intimate partner violence. But I think more broadly, there's just a kind of refocus on the user's perspective in these quite kind of harrowing cases. Now, for many victims of hacking, one of the challenges is that they actually are not aware of that they are victims. And so we've seen this kind of efforts to kind of have disclosure and such when there's a kind of hacking instance, so that those who might be unaware that they've been hacked are actually informed. But in our work in this paper, we actually explore perhaps a slightly different group, which is those who are unsure victims. And that is to say, victims who suffer many of the consequences of being hacked, but are actually unsure if they have actually been hacked at all. And even in some cases, it would appear that they perhaps haven't been hacked. And this, I think, reminds us of that kind of well-known adage that things imagined are real in their consequences. Now, the main focus of our paper is on these user experiences of being hacked. And we use data from online postings, self-reports of people being hacked in different ways. And we focused in particular on Internet of Things, smart home technology, in part because these devices can be so inscrutable and they can lead lots of challenges to try and understand whether you've been hacked or not when you have unusual events that happen with these devices. It's important, we should emphasize that our kind of definition was a kind of user-centric one, in that it was like the case where users themselves were deciding that they'd been hacked. We didn't add our own criteria on top of it, but it was to look at accounts when users themselves were making that decision. So we ended up with about 210 hack reports, and we have a diverse set of places that we took them from, different online discussion fora. Reddit was kind of about half of the posts that we took from there. Some were from Amazon product reviews, where reviewers talked about being hacked in use of a particular device. And then we had another set of contributions from product support forums, where users were discussing being hacked in different ways. Now, what goes into a hack report? Well, of course, clearly there's some sort of description of the technology, story of what happened, actions taken by the user to deal with the hack. But one of the challenges users have when they're reporting on a hack is quite an exceptional event. So they need to go to some lengths to actually justify, why is this actually a hack, and justify that, I know this sounds a bit exceptional, but I was actually hacked. And what's ever present in these accounts is this doubt and questioning about whether the user was actually hacked or not. And indeed, oops, sorry, I need to kill this. I think did I go back? There we go. Sorry. As one of our kind of posters kind of described it, when they're hacked, it was a kind of question of, is it a cat, is it a ghost, or was it actually a hack? Now, of course, there's kind of variety in these kind of reports as well. So we had some that were kind of warnings. So this is a case where one poster says, it was the best camera till it was compromised, but sure enough, last night about 9 p.m., I watched it move 5 degrees to the left and then back to the right. Strongly urge you not to buy this camera, because if one is compromised, then most likely their system is too. Or you might get these ones which are more kind of calls for help. My Chromecast was hacked and turns my TV on with creepy short video clips. What is going on? I called the police and the Arizona Attorney General. Or you might have ones that are also more about kind of initiating discussion in some way. This one, as a participant talks about, 10 minutes ago, my camera in the kitchen started making pornographic sounds through its speaker. It lasted about 30 seconds. Just before the event, my Google Home speaker made the blip noise as if someone had just triggered it. Did anyone else experience this? Surely I'm not the only one. Now, when a user is hacked, they have to kind of try and make sense of the hack in some way. They have to ask this question, like, have I actually been hacked? And one of the kind of ways of doing this is to look for unusual behavior. So, for example, devices sometimes will just, if there's an IoT device, it'll often have some kind of flashing lights on it. And then unusual behavior with flashing lights can, for some users, be seen as evidence of, well, maybe I've been hacked in some way. Then they have to kind of question and think, there's one thing about have I been hacked, but then, the next question is like, who's hacked me? Is this an anonymous hack, or is this actually something personal? Do I actually know the person who was hacked? And then indeed, why was I hacked? Is there some kind of particular reason? Is this actually something systematic in trying to kind of harm me? This, I think, is a quite revealing posting where the poster talks about they have a stalker, and so they purchase a security camera, and they're terrified, they need some sort of security, but then it actually turns out that they actually think that their camera has been hacked, and that they're actually, whoever's kind of hacked the camera is then actually watching them through the camera. You can see this kind of slight irony here, that the very device that actually is being purchased to kind of deal with this kind of situation is actually turning out then to be itself a vulnerability. So we return again to this kind of point about that for many of these hacks, we might not be sure whether there is actually a hack going on, and indeed actually users themselves are often not sure whether there's a hack. And it seems like for users, being in the situation of being hacked is actually this sort of situation of really sometimes quite distressing uncertainty and doubt, because discovering a hack is really only a partial discovery. You can never really be sure you've been hacked. And then it also leads to these, as I say, there's all these other kind of unanswered questions. Why have I been hacked? Who's actually hacked me? And it leads in turn can lead to doubt, trauma, and blame. And it's kind of particularly upsetting. These are actually, of course, amongst those who are particularly vulnerable, as I said in the last case, who have actually sometimes purchased IoT to actually help them deal with this vulnerability. And they find this irony where it actually comes back and then becomes hacked. So how do users deal with the situation of thinking that their device is being hacked? Well, of course, they can attempt to get technical support. Sometimes they'll go and try and get kind of legal support in some ways. And in particular, this is kind of, these are these cases where people are dealing with where they think they know the whoever's hacking them. There was these cases where there was kind of people who were in a sort of apartment block, and they felt that their neighbors, who they were in perhaps having a dispute with, had actually hacked into their Wi-Fi network, and so they were actually kind of those were the ones. And this kind of brings in, I think, the way in which a hack can be part of this, part of a kind of relationship with those who you're around. So it's not kind of a kind of disembodied thing, but one that's actually very much part of the relationships you might have with ex-partners, potential stalkers, neighbors, and the like. And while at times we might show some skepticism to some of these kind of accounts that are given of being hacks, it is important to acknowledge that they do cause real harm and hurt. Here's one case where there's a kind of camera that's in a child's room, and then the child reports that they hear somebody talking through the camera, and the child thinks it's their mother that's doing it. What, Mum, why did you talk to me on the speaker? Right now you said, hey, go to sleep. I don't like it. You said stop playing and go to sleep. And then the child comes and kind of reports this to the parent, who is obviously distressed that this is kind of coming out outside without their control. So to conclude, as I say, we've kind of focused on this question about what is it to be hacked? What's the user experience of being hacked? And I think that leads to kind of quite an interesting kind of technical kind of area to think about, which is not designing for preventing hacks, but designing for support for those who have been hacked. And many of our participants just had this very simple question: have I been hacked? And needed support on answering that question. In our discussion, we'll also talk a little bit about cybernoia, which is a kind of term we kind of use to mean cases where the technology, in this case, kind of causes distress in different ways, and particularly can lead to some kind of fears and perhaps slightly exaggerated fears through their use of technology. And for us, I think it's very important, I think, to kind of move on in how we think about hacks, and to not just think about them as technical objects, but to think about them as social objects as well. And in a sense, our work is really just trying to start by letting us think about what is the life world of the hack? What is the world that the hack is actually part of? Thank you.